You're in a good place now. You are listening to Perspectives with Ashley Burgess.
Welcome back live to Live Your True Life Perspectives, and I'm your host, Ashley Burgess. Tonight I'm talking about sex, from meeting to marriage, and how sex changes, and how sometimes we need to work to get it back. I'm also going to be talking about later in the hour a secret about sex that you have never, ever thought about. I'm going to reveal it tonight on the show because I think it's time for everybody to know the facts. So let's talk about sex tonight. We're talking about sex on Live Your True Life Perspectives tonight because it's an important factor in life. It's something that we all deal with. It's something that we all desire to have, right? And sex changes throughout a relationship based on from the example and the existence and the beginning of the meeting and the coming together and meeting somebody and having this amazing electrical chemistry, rock your socks off sex, to the process of getting to know each other and moving in and all those types of things, to the marriage quotient. And the changes that evolves throughout the sexual revolution in anybody's life is massive. It's massive changes, and I want to talk about why that changes. I want to talk about tonight why a lot of us experience less sex when we're married, why that is, how to get that back. I want to talk about the concepts of women and men and how they feel about sex and kind of the changes and the various thoughts and feelings and the attachments and the dependency and those types of things. I want to talk about rushing into sex versus waiting, okay? I'm going to be talking about, not using protection versus using protection, and not just the fact about disease or anything like that, but actually the emotional impact that has on as well. And a lot of people don't realize a lot of these things that I'm going to be talking about tonight because there's an emotional impact that is felt as well as there's a fear factor. When we don't know what other people are doing and we're not married and we don't have a clear, concise idea of the relationship, oftentimes women feel more fear than men. They feel more fear because they're putting themselves on the line. They feel more fear because oftentimes they're having unprotected sex and they're not sure if the person they're having sex with is having sex with other people. Okay? And because of that emotional impact on the psyche based on the fear factor and the fact that they might be having sex with somebody else causes a lot of the arguments and fights in the beginning of a relationship. And I want to talk about that later on too. But right now, I want to talk about sex in the beginning, how women and men feel. And women feel a lot differently than men. Okay, not all men. I believe that most men connect in a sexual relationship, but I believe that women, more than men, put an emotional factor on the sex more than men do. And what I mean by that is even if a woman has sex, on the second or third date, her reality of attachment when she has sex is more so than a man. Okay. And there's some women out there, you're going to tell me, no, Ashley, you know what? That's not true. I can have sex and it doesn't bother me. I don't have any sort of emotional, implementation or connection with that guy, and that's fine. Maybe you're one of the rarities. Maybe you're one of the types of people that can have sex and don't have any feelings about it. But the majority of women are emotionally attached after they have sex with someone. Okay? The majority of women. And I don't know the exact statistic on that right this second. I'll pull it up here if there is any statistics on that. But if you think about it, most women equate emotions and connection to sex. So that's obviously pretty normal for that. There's a lot of men that feel the same way too as well. But I think we have to look at that attachment. And I think it's interesting how knowing that we get attached easily, knowing that we get dependent easily, and we still have a tendency of wanting to get into that sexual relationship very quickly. And I think that's where a lot of us go wrong. I think that's where a lot of us put too much of a burden and stress on our life based on the fact that we wanted something early on in the relationship. I found that oftentimes when people actually wait for a while, and it can be difficult for some people, I understand, but they really get to know that person and know, hey, is this someone I really want to be around? Is this someone that I really want to have in my life? Is this someone that I can have conversations with? Is this someone that I even like? Because I know that there's some folks out there, and I've had some clients come into my office and say, hey, we rushed into it, it felt good, what have you, but then, it was just the worst relationship ever. I mean, we fought about everything. We didn't have that much in common. There was a lot of stress and anxiety. And, I really wish I could have not been through that. But I did. And the sex prolonged it, right? The sex prolonged it. So let's think about this from the beginning of the meeting. When we meet somebody in the very beginning, and there's some sexual attraction, kismet, chemistry, it's interesting how it's hard to keep your hands off each other, right? Isn't that funny? Think about it. If you've been married for a while now, think about how it was when you first started together, right? Yeah, things have changed. And, one of the big caveats that a lot of us don't realize is that, life is a funny scenario. Life is a funny scenario because we have to work so hard to not take things for granted, right? We have a tendency of taking things for granted because it's commonplace, because it's been around, because this is something that's been around often. We're used to it. It's around. It's there. And we're like, oh, God. But we have to work at it to make that change. Because in the beginning, it's easy, right? In the beginning, it's something new. It's exciting. Anything in the beginning of anything is pretty new and exciting. I think there was that Sade song, Never As Good As the First Time. I think that was a song. And, you think about it, and I don't know about the first time for some people. I mean, sometimes you're just getting into it and trying to figure out each other's bodies and that kind of thing, so it might not be exquisite the first time. However, when something is new, it's human nature to pursue it, to be interested, to, find an interest to it. And as things grow older and as our connection grows more solid, there's a tendency to maybe look around. And what I'm saying is that in society today, based on certain types of media, that both TV shows and the news, you see people constantly, celebrities, and you see people, getting divorces and getting caught in a sexual deal, maybe having an affair and getting caught on that level. And we see a society and media basically telling us that it's okay. It's okay to step outside of the marriage. It's okay to step outside of the relationship. And I think that that's part of the epidemic of having challenges with the marriage and the sexual component. And what I mean by that is, let's look back at an idea that I've been thinking about for a long time. And I've talked about this with several clients and friends and relatives, and I'm going to talk about it with you right now. Is think about it. If you're married and before you got married, you had different sexual partners, okay? You had different sexual partners, different sexual experiences, and then you met somebody and you got married. You still reflect and can still reflect on those past sexual escapades, right? And some of you had some insane sexual escapades, and I mean some really, interesting stuff. I mean, the stuff that X-rated films are made out of. And you've had to come from that degree back into a normal marriage with a normal sex life. And that can be very difficult for a lot of people. Let me give you an example. There's a lot of folks out there that before they got married, throughout their growing up period, maybe experimented with a lot of different things, experimented with a lot of different sexual stuff. And all of a sudden they go from all that experimentation to a normal relationship. And you have to basically work to kind of rework your connection of what inspires you sexually and what you have. And I was thinking about this several years ago about what would happen if all of us had not had a sexual partner prior to our marriage. Okay. And I know some of you out there are saying, I'm not married yet. I get it. So let's just say that you're with somebody right now. You're in a relationship right now. You have a boyfriend. You have a girlfriend. What if that was your first sexual experiment? You would know You would know what's good or bad. You wouldn't know what's tame and what's crazy. And I'm not saying, okay, so you at the same time, yes, if that was your first experience, on top of that you had not watched pornography. Okay, nowadays, folks watch pornography and assume that what's going on that channel is what's going to be happening in their day-to-day life. And then they get a little what the heck, very disillusioned, because that's not really the case, is it? That's not really the case. And we have to watch out how some people would say warp. I would say how we program our mind based on what we have and based on what we want. And we really need to focus on, is that what we want, or is that what they're giving to us? Stay tuned when I return to me talking more about sex, about meeting to marriage, the sex changes, how to get, not the sex changes as far as sex change, but the changing of the thought on sex, the sex itself, how to get the sex back in the marriage, and, the secret that most people don't know. Check out the website, ashleyburgess.com, ashleyberges.com, and tell me what you think. I'd love to hear from you. Contact me and send me a note. Live Your True Life Perspectives with your host, me, Ashley Burgess. Be back this time in 2 shakes.
Turn it up and jump in the deep end on Perspectives. Now, here's Ashley.
Welcome back live to Live Your True Life Perspectives, and I'm your host, Ashley Burgess. Tonight, I am talking about sex, from the meeting to the marriage. How our dynamic in sex changes throughout relationships, and how we can work to get it back in a marriage, as well as a few secrets that you've never thought about that are extremely important for you to know about sex and the implication in your life. So, sex is very real, right? It's a very real situation. It brings us together, it bonds us, and all that good stuff. We create children from it, right? We procreate, we add to the population of this world. We do all kinds of stuff. We pleasure. We do all this kind of stuff when it comes to sex. And sex is one of those things that I think is a very personable thing. It's very personal because some people are very sexually active. Other people are not. I think that sometimes when people are married for a long period of time, the sex begins to dwindle for many reasons. The first thing is that it's not new anymore. The second thing is that you're in a routine now. And that routine sometimes gets in the way of being fly by the seat of your pants kind of crazy erotic couple, right? But the biggest thing is that I think when people get married, you become close friends. And over a period of time, if the marriage is really honestly a good marriage, you become closer friends. And that friendship, honestly, to some degree, obviously betters the relationship, but to some degree puts a damper on the sex life. Okay? And why I'm saying that is that when we have sex with somebody in the beginning, we can be kind of wild and crazy because, we don't have this, we don't really have a strong enough bond and friendship to it. And, maybe for the fact too, we don't really know the person enough to totally respect them, or to understand our respect level. And so I think that throughout a marriage, when a marriage is successful and working and good and has all those qualities of a good marriage, we have a tendency, right? We have a tendency of having a difficult time being freaky in the bedroom. And why is that? Because of the respect concept, because of the routine, because that's our friend. Because we respect that person. And I'm not saying that you need to get as freaky as you were back on, the 6-week mark. But I think that we have to open the lines of communication. And I think that sex morphs with the relationship. And this is what I mean is that I think that when we're just now meeting somebody, we want to connect with them so badly that the sex is like the cornerstone to the connection. But I think throughout that time, later on throughout the relationship, we begin to connect on different ways, on spiritual ways, on being grateful for them, on, being able to connect and personal hang out and talk and have, little dates and communication and connection and debating and philosophy and all those things that you didn't have in the beginning. So the sex doesn't have to be as exploratory, I guess, is what I'm saying. It can, and I think that sex kind of takes on different mutations of itself. And I think that where we lose some of our interest is when we want to have that crazy, crazy, crazy sex like we had in the beginning. And I know some of you out there, like, have even told me you don't want to get married because you want to have great sex. You've told me that you would rather be with somebody for a year and have phenomenal sex and then find someone else, that you don't want to settle down. You don't want to deal with that. That sex and the newness is so important to you that you would rather have that than somebody you're married to. And I get that. If that's what you want in life, then do it. But don't plan on getting married and having that same firework day after day, year after year, decade after decade, okay? It can morph and change, but our expectations have to change as well. I find that in the beginning of the relationship, a lot of us are just, we're going through the motions, we're interested, we're getting to know people. The sex is a lot of fun, it's very new, it's exciting. But I've also found that if we're only working on the sex part of that relationship relationship crumbles a lot quicker because it's got nothing to stand on, right? It's got nothing to stand on. And good God bless. In my past, yes, I've dated several people and I've had a lot of fun. And at the same time, there have been some people that, I could see a longevity in a relationship with, and others that the longevity wasn't necessarily there because our connection wasn't really there. But better yet, we weren't really in the same place at the same time. One of the biggest caveats of any relationship is growing together, not growing apart, not growing separately, not at different levels. And I've seen a lot of folks come into my office for couples therapy, and they're amazing people, but both people are not in the same place. One of the most heartbreaking things that I've seen before, and I think that a lot of us have gone through this in our life, mentally raise your hand right now as you're listening to this show, whether you're in your cubicle at work or you're driving to work or you're driving the kids to school or wherever you're at right in this moment, or you're about to go out on a date and you and your boyfriend or husband or girlfriend are listening to this. But it's interesting how we have at one time or another dated somebody that we truly, truly, truly loved, that we had a lot of emotional feelings to. A lot of these are the ones that I like to define as the one that got away, or the love of your life that didn't work out, or it wasn't the right timing guy or girl. The one that you tried so hard and kept going back to and it just didn't work. And that one usually, and I'll tell you a little caveat about that, something that a lot of people don't really realize, is that the reason why that didn't work is that you were on two paths at two different times. And I've had that a few times where it was like a 10-year difference. And I'm not saying that I was all so smart and all this stuff. I'm just saying there was a difference and a gap between where we were. And you can see this in friendship a lot too. Oftentimes in friendships that you've known people for a very long time, you see people kind of dividing up. You begin to, you don't spend as much time together. And when you do, it's like you're constantly reminiscing about the old times. And a lot of times that's just because we mentally think that the other person, like the other person isn't, I don't know, we have like this wall up thinking, that all we have to do is communicate about that. But, it happens in relationships. And I like to talk at the 10-year difference. The 10-year difference, because I've been in a relationship before where it's like we couldn't communicate correctly. We were on two different waves. And I've had friendships like that too, where I try to explain something, and as I'm explaining something, the person looks at me like I'm crazy. And it was funny, the other day, this was about a year ago, I was hanging out with an old friend of mine, and I really haven't seen them since this day, so it was about a year ago. And we were talking about, a philosophical concept about, dimensions and time and all this deep stuff. And I was explaining something, and at first he was just like, whatever, but then he started listening. But then it was funny because it was very hard to communicate, and he was asking me lots of questions, which I was trying to facilitate. But at the same time, I started kind of just realizing things. I realized that he had just started reading a book that I had given him 10 years before, and he forgot about it. And I had read that book over 12 years ago. And I realized that people are, and I'm not saying I'm brilliant, I'm just saying that I'm at a different stage in my life than they are. And so when we're at different stages, it's hard to be understood. When we're at different stages, it's hard to communicate very well. When we're at different stages, we want different things. And that's fine and that's dandy, but that's probably not going to work out in a relationship. It's probably not going to work out in a relationship because if you're 10 years apart, that person cannot get 10 years wiser in a period of a few months. Okay, and you can't stand still. So, I mean, you have to sit there and really, contemplate the relationship as it is as a whole. And I find that once we meet somebody and to the marriage concept and how the sex and what we desire and what we need changes, and it morphs based on our reality, our timing, our commitment, our responsibilities. But what do we do? What do we do when we've been married for 5, 10, 15 years and sex is kind of at a standstill? And I know there's a lot of folks out there right now listening to the show that is in love with their wife, in love with their husband, but they're thinking, my God, I mean, we just need to do something about our sex life. We need to make something happen here, because, we'd like to get that portion back. And you're not going to probably have it like you did when you just met and when you were dating and you're hot and heavy, but you can work to get it back. And I'm going to tell you in this next segment, I'm going to give you some of the information you need to know to get that sex life back in your marriage, to really jumpstart it and to get some of that fulfillment back so that you realize that it's there. And it's something that you have to work on, and it's something you're going to have to work on a weekly basis to really focus on this. But once you do, and once you change a certain mindset, you're going to realize how unique this is. Later on in the hour, I'm going to be talking about one thing that most people don't really realize, and they don't really connect with it, and how important that is. So in the last segment, if you are dating someone, you're currently dating someone, just newly dated someone, just met someone on a dating chat line, on a dating site, on a dating app, you've got to hear this. So stay tuned. Live your true life perspectives with your host, me, Ashley Burgess. Be back this time in 2 shakes.
This is Jake Busey, and you're listening to Perspectives with Ashley Burgess.
Welcome back live to Live Your True Life Perspectives, and I'm your host, Ashley Burgess. Don't forget to check out the show on Spreaker, Stitcher, Google Play, the Ashley Burgess Network, and our own iHeart station, and across the country for that matter. We've been talking today and tonight about sex, about our original sex life from meeting to marriage, and how the sex life changes over a period of time. And right now I want to talk about, if you've been married for a long period of time, for 5, 10 years, even 2 or 3 years, you know that your sex life has changed. And you want to probably get a little bit of that back. Maybe the frequency, maybe the level of sexual intimacy, maybe just getting sex back in your life. Because I have a lot of clients that come into my office that say, hey, I'm in love with my wife or I'm in love with my husband, but I've got to do something to get the sex back in my life because I'm starting to look around. Okay? And I realize that our responsibilities, if you have children, if you have animals, if you have kids, if you have an older relative that you're having to take care of, on top of your work schedule and all that going on, and trying to cook the dinner and do all this, that's a lot going on. Okay? And I give you kudos to that because you're doing a good job. Keep it up. You're doing a good job and you're doing what you can, and that's what matters. But what about the sex? What about that romance? What about that connection? Because I don't always believe that the actual physical act of sex is what's always constantly needed. I think that romance and snuggling and that kind of concept is very important as well. And I think that we often lose that too because there's not enough time in the day. because I'm sleepy, I'm tired, I have a headache, whatever that might be. And let me explain. The reason why that didn't impact you before you got married and moved in and everything was because you weren't living together and you weren't seeing each other all the time. And so you made the most of when you did see each other, right? And there were times when you didn't have sex or didn't cuddle or whatever back when you were dating. But for the most part, we put our best foot forward, right? We worked our butt off to keep that romance going. And there's some things you can do right now. And I know that some of you might say, well, wow, this is changing everything. We're having to change things, and there's some changes that need to go into effect. The first change that I would suggest a married couple to do is, if you haven't already, if you don't have 2 bathrooms, then okay. But if you do have 2 bathrooms, no matter if one's on the other side of the house, one person needs to use that bathroom and the other person needs to use the other bathroom. And why I'm saying that is that there needs to be some mystery. Okay? And I'm talking about when you're going to the restroom, number 1 or number 2, there needs to be some mystery. And, back when you were dating, you didn't just fart when y'all were watching a movie, right? You didn't just let one rip. Okay? Back when you were dating, some of you might, and you might get off on this. I'm not getting into that on this hour at all tonight. Not at all, not at all. But for the most part, you kept that mystery. Some of you, for God's sakes, if you had gas or you had gastric distress, you would actually get up and leave and lie about whatever and go back home and deal with your gastric distress. Well, nowadays, since you've been married, you let it all hang out. It's time to change that. Okay, it's time to put your foot down on that and to change it. And you can slowly, incrementally change this. And that's what's so amazing. You can slowly, incrementally change this and make this work into your advantage. And what I'm meaning by that is, for you women, if you're waxing your upper lip, right? If you're doing something like that, if you're, cutting your toenails, if you're having gastric distress, if you're running to the restroom, whatever it is that's not extremely feminine needs to be done as you are the only witness. And this could go a long way to creating a more romantic sexual environment, because again, you're kind of going back to those dating times, right? Making sure you're cleaning up your dirty laundry, your dirty clothes. Taking care of your unmentionables. Those types of things are important when it comes to creating that vibe. The second thing that's awesome is, I remember when you were dating, and I know some of you. I know, okay, because I know some of you, because I know I did it. I would get up early and brush my hair, and then I would get up early and brush my teeth, when I was staying over. You know what I'm saying? And this is something that is quite clever and actually works very well to everybody's advantage, because when was the last time did you want to kiss someone that has morning breath? Okay, yes, there's a significant no and a boo hiss in the background. Yes. Do you see what I'm saying? Who wants to kiss morning breath? I don't want to do it. Sorry, don't sign me up for that. Sign me up for something else. I just don't want to do it. And so getting up a few minutes earlier on the weekend, because that's when normally, when you're not working early hours, that's when normally, you're going to have something happen. Something happen. Get up a little earlier. Brush your hair. Wash your face. Brush your teeth. Gargle. It's amazing. Take the retainer out, okay? Take your retainer out. Wash it off. Brush your teeth. Floss. Brush, put a comb through your hair. And this is going to go a long way to creating this romantic vibe. And see, what's going to happen is your partner, if they're not listening to this show right now, will begin to follow suit. They will begin to do the same thing, okay? And then you just hope you don't run into each other. But eventually it might be kind of cute, But if you got that separate bathroom, that's awesome too, because you can do that. And you can kind of get back into the romantic feel, right? Some of you might need to take a shower in the morning, okay? Those are things that we did back in the day that needs to be brought back in, okay? Those are the things that if we bring that back in, guess what we get? We bring it back in, We incorporate this romantic feeling in the air. We incorporate the sexy feeling in the air, and we begin to get more sexual, more romantic, more, think about it. That's what it's all about. That's what it's all about, because when we create the canvas to paint the picture, we get what we want. Yeah. And over time, it's not going to happen tomorrow. Like, you're not the first Saturday, Sunday, whatever you end up doing this, and it's not all going to happen. But prepare the canvas. Begin to do this, okay? And as you do this, you're going to realize that y'all are going to become more sexually attracted to each other. You're going to start feeling, a little spunky, a little aroused more. And the reason for that is you're creating the environment to do this. On a different side of the coin, it's about dedication. In order to make any marriage work long term, it's about the dedication factor. How dedicated are you? And what trumps what? Okay? Does your relationship and friendship trump the sex card? Because it has to. Because it has to, if you think about it. Because sex over time can work when you're following what I'm talking about, but you have to be dedicated. And what I mean by that is the media, okay, the media is doing a really good job of trying to get people that are married to feel as though they're missing out on all the sex they can have. I've heard countless clients come into my office and say, well, the best years of my life are behind me, and here I am wasting it. These are my sexual prime. I'm in my sexual prime, and I hear a lot of you women saying that, okay? When you hit 40, I know. Y'all are in your sexual prime, and you feel like you're missing out on it. And I understand where you're coming from. And you have to sit there and think, what matters the most in my life? And you have to refocus back into the marriage. And it's easy to sit there and be at work and to see some hottie, walking down the hall at work, and you're like, oh my God, look at him. Holy hand grenade, Superman. And the next thing you know, you're talking to them, you're hanging out, you're working on a project together, you end up going out for a few drinks, and then what happens? And let me explain, when you hit that slippery slope of having sex outside of the marriage, okay, that changes the entire dynamic. Because it's weird, because what I've seen with women and men is that they relate differently in this situation. Men have a better ability to be able to have sex with another person and have sex with their spouse. Women, on the other hand, have a tendency of, when they start having sex with someone else, they close the other person out. It's almost like they can only have sex with one person. Now, I'm talking about a woman that's emotionally have equilibrium, not somebody that's going through maybe some personal identity issues or some abandonment issues. Because abandonment, there is a lot of issues like that with abandonment. When people have been abandoned in their past, it's easier for them to have sex outside of the marriage. Because if you think about it, it's significant. Because oftentimes when somebody's been abandoned, they feel that everybody's going to abandon them anyway. And on the flip side, when we've been abandoned and we're still hurt from that, what happens with that, right, is that we screw ourselves over because we do the opposite of what we should do, and we basically push people out of our lives. So cheating on a spouse would be a way to push someone out of our lives. And then on the flip side, we can say everybody always leaves me. Nobody's there for me. This is constant. My life is a total wreck. And that's what happens. And I'm not at all putting down the person that has been abandoned, but I'm saying it's time to see the cycle. Okay? When we make our own bed and lie in it, and realize that if you are dealing with abandonment issues, it's time to come clean with those issues and realize where they come from and get the buck to stop there, because you don't want to create that cycle. You don't want to mess over your relationship. You don't want to have that type of regret on you. Okay, because it's a cycle, and that's not something you need to see. So you need to seek a therapist. You need to seek someone like me to discuss and get through that abandonment, so that you can move on in your life and make your life amazing, instead of constantly following that track of falling out, abandonment, re-abandonment, abandoning, starting this, putting the roadblock up, ending the relationship, doing it again and again. Because when somebody gets close to you, then you want to run. But if you think about the marriage, the biggest thing is really focusing on that marriage. And when I return, I'm going to be talking a little bit more about marriage, but I'm also going to be talking about a secret about sex that most of us don't realize, and how it can better or complicate our entire life. Stay tuned, because Live Your True Life Perspectives with your host, me, Ashley Burgess, will be back this time in 2 shakes.
You could be my luck. Get in here. You're listening to Perspectives with Ashley Burgess.
Welcome back live to Live Your True Life Perspectives, and I'm your host, Ashley Burgess. Tonight I've been talking about sex, and right now I've been talking about sex and marriage and how to get that sex life back in a marriage. And it's normal. You're normal to not be having the same amount of sex as you were having when you're dating. It's even normal not to be having sex. And why that is that you got to get the romance back. And like I was talking about in the last segment, I was talking about those little tips and tricks to getting it back, as well as, using 2 separate bathrooms, adding mystery back into the relationship when it comes to sounds and unsightly sounds coming out of the human body, as well as the number 1 and going number 2, as well as brushing those teeth, combing those hair, and everything else, even taking a shower before your spouse wakes up, because that will actually propel you to have a more of a sexual romantic feeling. It'll make you feel better about yourself, and you'll be more likely to have sex. But the best thing is dedication as well. We have to remember that dedication is so important. The media and everybody's wanting to tell you that it's okay to go outside of the marriage, and what I've seen when people go outside of the marriage is they stop working on their marriage. They stop working on their marriage. And let me explain one thing is that, the sex with somebody at the office place might be incredible, and it might reawaken you, and you're alive again. But you know what? Even if you were to divorce your husband or wife and you got with them, the sex would get boring and old at some point in time if you don't follow this regimen, because every relationship usually goes this direction. And that's normal. And people do not talk about it. It's unfortunate that we have a society of people that don't talk about it, because I think oftentimes we think that everybody else has a better sex life than we do. We automatically assume that everybody on the planet has a better sex life. You go out with friends and you're like, oh, I bet they're doing it. Oh, geez. You know what I mean? If we just had a sex life like them. And we have to stop the judgment. We have to stop judging ourselves in a negative way. And we have to basically realize that most people are in this same boat with us. Okay? We are not a minority. We are part of the silent majority. And we have to realize that. And once we realize that we are not abnormal, that this is a normal process in life, and that we can do something about it, we begin to do that. And that is really reaffirming our dedication to our marriage. And one caveat, by the way, is that I've seen when people do go outside of the marriage, I've seen their lives begin to fall apart. And what I mean by that is, think about it. Back when the day when you were dating around, and let's just say you were dating 2 or 3 people at one time, you remember how hard that was? You remember when you were dating 2 people at one time, how hard that was? Now think about dating somebody on the side with your marriage. You were so preoccupied with not getting caught and the cheating process and all that stuff that you can't really focus on what really matters anymore. The sad thing about it too is that because of that covering up, for most women, they kind of almost divide themselves from the marriage because they feel bad about what they are doing, because it's going against your values. And anytime you're going against your values, like anytime that you go against what's fundamentally right in your life, it's painful, because think about it. You are living antithetical to your values. Okay? That doesn't work. That doesn't work. It doesn't make somebody feel good in their life. You know what I mean? It's like, that's not gonna help you out in life. It's like, it's not gonna help you. It's like seeing a starving child and not stopping to help that child. And if helping the hungry and the poor is important to you, then you've got to stop and help that kid. Okay? And it's like seeing that and continuing to speed past it in your life. You can't do that. You've got to come to terms. Either you've got to change your values and say, it's okay that I screw around. It's okay that I have sexual relations behind my husband or wife's back. Or you have to change that. Or you need to stop screwing around. And this is a very powerful situation. This is a very powerful situation because when you think about this, we realize that a lot of times we're sold this bill of goods. We see on media and on the internet and everything, people talking about sex and this and that. And really honestly, we've got to really focus on what matters. And if we focus on what matters, we can better our marriage because we stop judging our situation. We stop looking around to find someone else to have sex with and not deal with our issue. We stop doing that. We realize the media stigma. We begin to reboot the romance by doing the small things that makes us sexy and feel good, both for men and women. We go out of our way and we spend some time, and then we also basically begin to pencil in some time throughout the week and the weekend to get together and to begin to cuddle and to romance and to communicate and to begin to bring sex back into the marriage. One thing I want to talk about before the end of this show is that sex is a very real thing. It's the closest physical contact we can have. And because it's the closest physical contact that we can have, we have to remember what it means. And we have to remember how deep a contact this is and how we have to be very, very certain when we are having this with other people. And what I mean by that is a lot of times we go into a relationship quite quickly and we allow sex to be part of it immediately. And what happens? We can get hurt. A lot of folks can get very attached, dependent. There's also a fear factor that can come out of it because a lot of times, a lot of you out there listening are not using protection. Okay. And I'm not sitting there getting on you. I'm not being the jerk off in the room. But, when we don't use protection, it's even a deeper amount of physical contact, right? There's a lot of trust in that. And think about it. If you haven't gotten both tested and you haven't gone together to get tested, you're taking their word and they are taking your word. How many times have they had unprotected sex with other people? A lot. You're not the first one. Don't you think that it's important to get into a relationship with someone that cares about their body? Think about it. When a woman agrees to having unprotected sex with a man, doesn't the man begin to wonder how many times the woman's having unprotected sex? Okay? Now let's flip that around. And the biggest thing is, what if they're cheating? What if not cheating, but what if they're just, y'all are in a relationship and you've just started dating and they're seeing other people and having sex too? And you got to realize how important waiting to figure out about the sex component is, realizing how important it is, choosing wisely, and once you've chosen, using the right protection until it's not needed anymore. Because when you choose protection, when you are just dating, what that does for you is that allows a protection level. Okay? That allows you some protection. And I find that women need that a lot more in their mind than men. And I think that a lot of you women out there wonder if he's cheating on you and wonder if he's being honest with you. And I think a lot of it goes back to the fact that you're not using protection. Okay, if you were using protection when you had sex every time with them, you might not be that scared about it. And you might not let it implode into your relationship. And you would be able to be a lot more freewheeling and more laissez-faire than you're right now, being overbearing, questioning his every move, his every minute, what he's doing when he's on the road. The next thing I'd like to talk about, last but not least, and this is extremely important, this is probably one of the most important things that you will hear. Sex is real. And if you are having sex with somebody, realize that when you have sex with somebody, their energy becomes part of yours. Now think about it. Haven't you ever had like a massage done? Maybe even at the airport or something like that, where you had like a little neck massage where you're like, man, that person's like their energy. I mean, their vibe. I don't know if it was very good. I kind of feel a little stressed out. take that times 1,000,000 when you're having sex with somebody. That negative energy, I mean, that can make you almost feel defiled. That energy, it's like sleeping with the enemy. And realize when you're having sex with someone, that is extremely intimate. Your aura, your energy, everything becomes one with that person. Is that what you want for you? Do you want that person to have their hands and everything all up on you? Do you want them to make a mark and to place a mark on you like that? Is that what you want? Really, really analyze it before you have sex with somebody. Because you know what? Does this show your body value by having sex with this person? Does this value you or does this devalue you? Think about that clearly every single time before you're even thinking about having sex with somebody, and analyze that, okay? There's a reason why there was a movie, Having Sex with the Enemy and Sleeping with the Enemy. Is that what you want? Do you want somebody that's bringing you down, that's trying to have power over you, having sex with you? Do you want that around you? And think about how that energy will get on you, because there's no way it can't. Okay? Analyze that. Realize that sex is real. Choose wisely. Use protection. If you haven't been married and you don't have an agreement and you're not just seeing each other, use protection to take that fear factor out. Okay? Not only is it smart, but it shows that you respect your own body. And you know what? If I was out in the dating pool right now, I would want to hope that I was dating somebody that respected themselves and their health enough to say, hey, I'm going to be using protection until until it's just you and I, and even then, we're going to have to do a test together and find out if we're good. So remember that. Remember, you can bring that romance back into that marriage. It's never too late. Check out the website, ashleyburgess.com. You can contact me right on the website. Love to hear from you. Live your true life perspectives with your host, me, Ashley Burgess. We'll be back this time, and you know it. We'll be back this time in 3 shakes.